Hello, my name's Julia Dreblow, and this is a short presentation to talk you through how to use Fund EcoMarket. I'll start off briefly with who I am, who we are. So my name's Julia, and I've been specialising in this area for about 25 years now. I've always felt it's phenomenally important that we pay close attention to where we invest. And when I left Friends Provident, which is now part of Aviva, back in 2008, I took the decision to set up my own business, doing a combination of information provision and helping others to grow their businesses on this site. So we run the Fund EcoMarket site now, which is a whole of market database for people who are interested in sustainable, responsible and ethical investment funds and want to understand how to use those funds as part of financial planning. And we also work with others, both industry organisations and on a consultancy basis with a few other platforms and organisations who've got their own contacts through to clients. Why do I do this? It's really important. It matters where we invest. Also, clients' opinions matter. People should have the way they feel about different issues reflected through their investment selection decisions. And also, I think it makes sound financial sense. I think people are increasingly aware now, at long last, that issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, equality, etc., can all affect company share values. If they manage these things well, they tend to do better. If they manage them less well, they tend to underperform. Of course, financial performance is hugely driven by lots of different issues. So there's no simple formula that we can say. Nothing is, of course, guaranteed, and what you've got to bear in mind when you're watching this video and anything else we produce is we are not authorised to give advice. These are our opinions, this is based on our research. Please talk to a regulated financial advisor if you're looking for any advice on these funds or any other type of investment. We do not deal directly with members of the public. This is a site for financial services professionals. So this short video is telling you how Fund EcoMarket works. Fund EcoMarket, if you look at the whole of the front page, looks something like this on the left hand side. You've got share buttons at the top, you've got a band where you can go to lots of different supporting information, which includes a find an advisor list for members of the public or individual investors who may be looking for an IFA in this area, but lots of support material and information to help you navigate your way around. So this video is just a brief overview. I'll explain then briefly what the site is. It's a whole of market, open to everybody, free to use because it's supported by fund managers. We took the decision when this tool launched that we wanted to make sure that no one would have the excuse of not being able to afford to buy our data or not want to sign up to things. So we've just had it completely open so people can use the site as and when they wish. It is, however, designed for professional advisors. It doesn't have information all over it that helps individuals to navigate this market. I would suggest you go to a financial advisor if that's what you're looking for, but you're free to browse the site. Anyone can look at the site as you wish. It's designed, however, to help financial services intermediaries to match client aims, so individual investor aims, to fund options. So investment funds are very different, and we want to make sure that people can always understand what the funds do. It looks like there's a lot of information on the site. There is a lot of information on the site, but that's because these funds are rightly very different, because there are so many issues the investment community can help to tackle and to help to improve by having sound, decent, forward-looking investment strategies. Importantly then, this site helps you to look under the bonnet. All the information we provide is supplied by fund managers. We are not making this stuff up ourselves. It's not based on our opinions. It is based on the information fund managers give us to put on the site when we do our regular reviews of the funds and ask them to fill in our questionnaires. There's around about 600 funds on the site. In 2020 there were over 17,000 unique users who use the site, and it's completely designed to complement other tools that are designed for financial services intermediaries, so it goes alongside rather than instead of the tools you're currently using. Now, I mentioned that the site is free to use. The logos at the bottom are those fund managers who basically help to pay for the site. So their funds are listed ahead of other people's funds. They're otherwise treated the same. They have the same questionnaire sent out to them. We put the same information on. The only funds we will refuse to put on the site are those funds where we look at something and think this is actually not designed for clients who are interested in this area. So if a fund tells us it's specifically designed for clients with an interest in environmental and social issues, we will add their fund to the site free of charge. So I'm going to start by showing you the easiest way to use the site. The first thing you can do on the site, if you know the name of an investment fund you want to look up and you want to understand how it tackles environmental, social, governance and ethical type issues, type in the name of the fund. In fact, you can just put in part of the name of the fund, and any fund that we hold on our database that has got that name showing will pop up once you've clicked search. Or if you know which fund management company you want to look for and you want to focus on those fund managers who are partners with us, in return for they're sponsoring the site, effectively they're paying for the site to keep going and being free, we make it so that you can find their funds very, very quickly just by clicking on their logo. Their funds will appear. The next bit to visit then is the Style Finder tool. This is really popular with loads of users. I know lots of financial advisors find it quite hard working out where to start in this area. So what we've created is a small microsite which sits alongside the fund database. So this is actually a separate URL. It's a URL that you can give to your clients and ask them to fill in the questionnaires on their own if you wish. Basically, it's 20-something indicator statements, and clients click what they're interested in, then click search, and then as you will see at the bottom, it will generate a list of the 3 strategies that most closely represent what they have asked for. Now there's lots of crossover across the strategies. There's lots of variation within each of the strategies, so please don't take that as being absolutely hard rules and regulations. It's not. This is just an indicator to help you get started by telling you a few different areas that you should probably start by looking up. It'll give you an idea if a client's looking at a particular area. It's just designed to help you to get started. So in case you need help, just to put this all in perspective, the 3 different things that a financial advisor should be doing when giving advice on this area is looking at asking an initial question as part of your standard fact find, which is to ask a client what they are interested in or whether or not they would like to have their views on ethical, social, environmental or faith-based issues integrated into their advice process or into the discussions you have with them. There's different ways you can ask that, of course. You could just ask someone whether or not they're interested in environmental issues and would like them taken into account. You can word it how you like, but I would suggest a single open question like that. You can then use the Style Finder tool, or you can have some other method if you want to work out generally what area a client's interested in. And then after that, if you feel a client wants to go into a lot more detail, design yourself a supplementary fact find questionnaire. There's loads of information on this site to help you do that, but basically to have a list of those things that someone might want to be interested in. But do try and encourage clients not to tick everything, because you can end up with effectively nowhere left to invest if you do that. So to talk you through our SRI styles classifications, which are probably the most often used part of the Fund EcoMarket site, we've built a classification system which groups funds by what the funds actually do and what they set out to do. So the first group then we refer to as being themed funds. So these are funds which are focused on sustainability, which is a combination of environmental and social issues, and those funds that focus far more clearly on just environmental issues, and those funds that focus far more on social issues. So we split them into 3 different groups. The next group then is those funds that we consider to be values-led. The vast majority of those are what we call ethical funds, and there's also a tiny number of funds that we would classify as being faith-based. Very few funds in that category, but worth mentioning because they have different characteristics to other values-led funds and indeed other funds in the market. The next group then, where it becomes a little bit more complicated, are those funds which have got tilts, so they're pushing more in one direction or another. We've got 2 main groups here. There are those that set out to focus largely on sustainability issues. They will go overweight in more sustainable companies and underweight in less sustainable companies. They tend not to exclude many, if any, sectors, and they can cause a degree of confusion because people will ask questions like, why is there an oil company in my sustainability fund? But the reason is because they're tracking an index or some other mechanism which they're saying they're giving investors exposure to the whole market. However, they are tilting in one way or another rather than implying that they have clear exclusions, which they tend not to have. This next group then, ESG Plus, is about those funds which focus on risk mitigation, so environmental, social and governance related risks, typically though they have exclusions in place as well. So in order to qualify for this fund EcoMarket tool, funds have got to show that they're doing more than simply doing a bit of enhanced risk management. The last group then is the group which is most contentious. These are funds which have got typically ESG integration built into them, but they probably only exclude a tiny fraction of the market, maybe only a couple of percent, maybe up to 10–20%, but basically they will look like normal funds. Now, very often these funds, in common with many other funds across this range, will have engagement strategies. So they do stewardship activity, which is aimed at encouraging higher standards. Their strategies vary though. Across all of these groups, there is variation within each of these styles. So we're just picking up on the main characteristics. The ones on the left you will find look quite different from what you would see as being perhaps a conventional funds. The further you go over to the right, the more conventional they will look. You're more likely to have strong positive stock selection strategies over to the left. You're more likely to have a heavier emphasis on responsible ownership and gradually lighter exclusions as you move over towards the right. The basic rule to keep in mind though is that you should look at what the fund does. We provide massive information on Fund EcoMarket that enables you to see what the funds do, and lots of text and links. So when you're looking at any of these funds, look under the bonnet, but this red, amber, green classification gives you a quick ready reckoner as to what types of funds will be likely to focus on what kinds of areas. So to focus then briefly on client aims, let's go through the examples 1 to 7 on the left hand side here. If someone's genuinely interested in sustainability, the vast majority of these funds will have a good level of general interest in the area. Faith-based funds don't necessarily focus on the area at all, on sustainability at all. They might build it into their stock selection, but generally that's not what they're about. Likewise, limited exclusion funds, they may or may not have a strong emphasis on sustainability. They may have an emphasis on something else, for example, just excluding armaments or just excluding tobacco. So please be very careful there. So we've then got a client who perhaps is more into the area, who wants to affect change, who's really looking for positive impacts and outcomes and wants to direct money towards companies that are doing fantastic things. The 3 funds over to the left are the very easy ones to say, yes, this is what these funds are about. They do vary, but by and large, what you will get in each of these is a good selection of those funds, of those companies, where we can see that they are doing things to help us to transition towards a lower carbon economy, or to address biodiversity issues, or perhaps social issues such as lack of equality and perhaps focusing on labour standards, etc. So in their respective areas, each of those funds on the left are very, very heavily focused on this area. Now, interestingly, also a lot of ethical funds are very focused on this as well. However, not all ethical funds do, which is why we've given it an amber smartie here. So a lot of ethical funds focus very hard on trying to affect change, and a good number of sustainability and ESG plus funds too, but not all the funds in those categories do too. So again, you need to look at the fund specific details, look on Fund EcoMarket to see whether or not the fund manager does aim to help deliver positive change. Look at the filter options that relate to a fund. The next one, again, clients ask about very regularly. Clients want to avoid coal, oil and gas majors. So the ones on the left, the sustainability and environmentally themed funds, yes, they'll avoid coal, oil and gas majors. Ethical funds generally, I would say, would also, and social funds, I would say, generally would also, but there's not necessarily hard and fast rules, so you can't always guarantee that that's the case, which is why I've given them, again, the amber smarties there. So coming down the list then, if you've got a client who's focused more on social issues, on people issues, sustainability funds, yes, absolutely, they'll be very focused there, as will social funds, as will ethical funds. Environmental funds, normally you would expect them to be pretty good at social issues, but that's not necessarily central to their strategy, so you may have areas that a number of clients would disagree with. So again, look under the bonnet, check what the fund does. So example client number 5, someone who's more focused on values-based issues and concerns about maybe more traditional ethical issues. Clearly that's the kind of client who you would normally put towards an ethical fund. However, most sustainability funds will have strict ethical exclusions or areas that they simply wouldn't invest, because tobacco and armaments companies, etc., aren't contributing towards transitioning the world to be a cleaner, safer place, so they have no place in those sustainability funds. Environmental, social funds, etc. Again, many would be very good at that, and many would exclude, but not all of them necessarily. Coming down to the next one then, clients who want to encourage companies to change, typically through stewardship activity, through putting pressure on companies at AGMs, etc., but also by incentivising companies by favouring those assets, those companies which have got stronger, more positive strategies. Again, the funds off to the left are your safer areas there. The ones over to the right, they very often have got strong stewardship activity, but you would need to have a quick look at the voting record or the stewardship policies and check that it was in line with the areas your client was looking for. The final client example then is probably the most difficult one that you're likely to come across, which is for clients who are interested in animal welfare issues. Now, funds vary massively across this. There's a lot of funds in this area where a company will only get into the portfolio if they've got the highest standards of animal welfare. So, for example, they're only using minimal number of animals for testing and adhering to what we call the 3 R's, and the chances are they would only invest or even consider a company that tested on animals, for example, where the company was doing it because they were legally required to do so, for example, for medical, pharmaceutical purposes, etc. So there's very few funds that apply complete exclusions for anything to do with animal welfare, animal concerns. So again, I would recommend you look under the bonnet for those issues also. So that takes us on to looking at the individual, more granular filter options that we have on Fund EcoMarket. So this first one you will see I've called Policies, Issues and Themes. This is really getting at what is it, what are the issues that a fund is focused on or considering. We split these into 4 groups: environmental, social and governance, that you'd be familiar with under the term ESG, and then of course ethical, which is where this area really largely started out. Within the filter options that you can tick, we then tend to start off with the very high level ones, like has it got a sustainability policy, social policy, governance or ethical, which for someone just wanting to do a high level search would be the filter options that you use. But you may wish to go a lot more granular. You may want to look at something like Arctic drilling, or excluding coal, oil and gas companies, or having a specific child labour theme, anti-bribery and corruption, animal testing, whatever it is you want to select. You can select as many or as few of these as you want, and at any point in time when you've done enough with an individual search, you can either click to go onto the next filter, or you can click outside of the box to take you onto the home screen, where you can then just click search, use the filters that you've already selected and use that to do a quick search. Now, this next filter option that you come onto then we call approaches and application. This is really how a fund deals with particular issues. A lot of people don't recognise this, but of course there are many issues we can deal with, but there are so many different ways in which we can approach them. We may decide to stay away from particular things, we may decide to focus on companies with the best, strongest practices, or we may decide that the important area is to focus on encouraging change. So this gives you 4 examples within the general stock selection area. So things like balancing pros and cons, focusing on positive impacts, hugely important area that a lot of people are selecting these days and very interested in real world effects of where we invest. Then we've got policies in practice, because these different strategies, the way in which an issue is approached is very often relevant to the kinds of companies that they land up investing in, large cap, small cap, for example, or companies that have been mapped across to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, for example. So the way they work in practice can vary greatly. And then there's also a column for other fund features, so specific to an individual fund, maybe to do with ratings or accreditations that they've got, or particular features, just intended to help you with your search. This third filter, which we've called responsible ownership, is an area that is hugely underestimated in terms of its importance. This is really to do with how a fund management company operates behind the scenes, who's doing what is it that they're doing to encourage higher standards. Now, I'm going to digress a little and tell you why this is so important. The reason is because in order for us to transition to net zero or a more equitable, fairer future, we've got to do 2 things. We've got to, of course, invest a lot more money in those companies that are developing the technologies and delivering the kind of future that we want to see by creating new products, new services, new ways of doing things. But none of that will really work unless, of course, it's complemented by change in existing companies. So what we need to see alongside investing in solutions companies is pressure put on all companies everywhere that are currently acting in ways that are unsustainable to encourage them to be more sustainable. And there's a range of different ways that can take place. Now, there's obviously hundreds of different filter options we could have put in this area, because there are some fund managers doing wonderful work in this area. But I've split this into 4 main areas to help you to understand it. So resources, so an asset management company, what kind of resources have they committed to this? Have they got in-house voting expertise? So you're voting your shares to try and encourage boards to change what they do. Do they do that in-house or do they outsource it? Then we've got things like responsible ownership and stewardship, which is around the engagement and voting that happens. Lots of different options here, and also transparency around voting, so you can see what a fund manager does, so you can work out whether or not it's what your client is expecting. And then we've got things like affiliations and collaborations. Now, to my mind, it's hugely important that fund managers work together on this kind of thing. And there are just a few examples here that are initiatives which there are many initiatives now, but these are just some examples that if people work together, we can actually achieve these things a lot faster. We can affect change a lot more effectively if fund managers pull together. And then there are other company features. So again, this last column is just a selection of different bits of information that can help you differentiate between the different asset managers in this area, because some have got across the board strategies that are helping to manage their emissions across the whole company, or manage their practices in a more responsible, positive fashion. Others are more boutique type fund managers, so they specialise. There's lots of different points of differentiation. I've just selected a few of the most important ones to add them onto the site here, and I hope you find this useful and get to understand the reason why this is so important. Right, so the next 3 filter options I'm going to be showing you are a lot more generic. So the first is that you can select by product type. So if you're looking for a primary fund, obviously that's an OIC or a CCAV, or if you're looking for a pension, you can narrow down your search. To help you narrow down your search further, we've got a list of different asset types. You can leave this blank if you want, or you can make use of it. It's entirely up to you how many of these you choose to select. Like I said earlier, click outside of the box to stop using the filter options and go through to the search function. And the third in this batch then is fund geographic region. We've just got some general classifications where we've clustered funds together under their main areas that they invest in geographically. As we said earlier, you don't have to use this option if you don't want to. Just click outside the box if you want to move on to the search function. Which brings us back to our last classification, last list of filter options, which is SRI styles, as I introduced earlier in the video. You can, if you want, just jump straight to this filter option and click those SRI styles you feel are relevant to your client. That will narrow the search down to only those funds within these SRI style classifications. If you want to ignore that on the grounds that you know that, for example, it's not only ethical funds that consider ethical issues, and it's not only sustainability funds that consider sustainability issues, you may prefer not to use this filter. But a lot of people do find it useful to help narrow down the search to a sensible number of funds that you can then research and do your further due diligence on. So once you have done all the clicking that you want to do, you click search and a long list of funds hopefully will appear. I would just say to start with though that the more filter options that you've selected, the more it will narrow down your search. So if you're finding that you're coming up with very few options, you may wish to reduce the number of filter options that you've selected. So I suggest you just have a play with it to get used to it. But basically, the more things you search, the more it reduces down the number of funds that will be presented to you. Once you have got your list of funds, you can then tick which you are interested in and click Save to PDF or Print. So all very self-explanatory. There are 2 print forms or save forms that you can have. One is just a list of fund names, and the other is with the more information option showing, so that you've got all the full details that the fund managers have supplied us with. Just be aware some of them are very, very long, so I wouldn't normally recommend ticking 30 funds and saying yes you want more information. You're liable to land up with a report that's 150 pages long. That may be what you want, it may not be what you want. So yes, tick the funds that you want and then click Save to PDF in one of the two variations that we offer. If you've put your client details in whilst you're on the site, when prompted to do so, you can add your client's name into it. You can add your own name into it. It'll show today's date. It's entirely up to you whether or not you do that. We don't save this information. We track how many clicks are on different things, but that is your information. So it's entirely up to you how much you use that for. But I would say for your audit trail, it's generally a good idea to make sure you've got a proper record of what you have researched. So I would generally say put something in that means that you can identify your client by this, so that you can put it on your records in case it becomes a compliance issue further down the line, or you've got questions with it later on. So in addition to Fund EcoMarket being a website, it's also now an app. And in some ways this is easier to show people through than the actual website. In order to download the app, search Fund EcoMarket. On the fund area, you click on that button, it takes you through that where you've got the bands of the different filters that I've just shown you through. And you've got the subheaders that show, so if you click the down arrow for each of the filter options, it will show the subheaders and you go into those groups that are of interest to you. You click search funds, exactly the same thing. You select which ones you want, and then you can add in your name at the end and email your findings to yourself. Okay, so you just put your own details in there, your name and your company name, just so that you have got it in your audit trail, so you've got a record of what you've searched. All I would say on this though is it's really easy to use. Once you've used it a few times, you'll notice that you can click through it in no time. So the app was really designed for using when you're sitting with a client, if you just want to check into things and see what exists, and you can have a play around with it and say, well, what happens if we do this? Okay, let's look at all the funds that say exclude child labour or exclude tobacco or coal, oil and gas. You can do that in seconds, and the app makes that very, very easy and very, very portable. So all you've got to do is search Fund EcoMarket. Likewise, it's free, same as the site. What there isn't on this though is lots of supporting and background information. So you may want to familiarise yourself with the website where you can read further. And on the website we've got lots of explanatory text. So you might want to get familiar with that before you start using the app in front of a client, when we're eventually in due course able to do that again. So the important thing here though is you can use it for your audit trail, you can email it to yourself for your due diligence and for your record keeping. And thanks to some changes that we made in 2020, you are now also able to search our sub-funds by individual issues. So for example, if a client wants to invest in a pension that excludes coal, oil and gas and excludes tobacco, that's an environmental issue and an ethical issue, and perhaps they want to invest somewhere that also aims to have positive impacts, and they may want to invest someone that's voting all their shares, it's really, really easy just to click those things as you go through the filter options and then click search to generate your list. So it's not only primary funds now as it was before the end of 2020, you can use that for sub-funds, so life and pension funds are searchable on the same basis now. The information is now copied across. So we enter it into the OIC information, the parent fund if you like, and then it goes across to, if you like, the child fund or the sub-fund. So what I'm hoping I've done with this video is to give you the information you need in order to put in place an advice process that brings sustainable, responsible and ethical investment issues and options into the way you operate. And just to run you through what that process could look like, we're talking about identifying which clients are interested, identifying their key areas of interest, perhaps using our SRI styles, going further, refining your research by looking at the individual filter options, the more granular options we talked about, and searching for relevant funds, recording your findings, and of course matching that also alongside standard factors, which you can either use the filter options that have got the geographic region, product type, etc. on our site, or you may have a different way you prefer to do that. So that basically gives you an idea of what an advice process can look like in this area, assuming you're doing your own fund selecting. And with that, all that remains to be said is thank you for listening. I really hope you found it useful. Web address, email address here on the site. Contact me if you wish. Please remember to bookmark Fund EcoMarket. Likewise, if you're on any of our sites, if you're using our YouTube site, I would say please also could you click follow on there also, so that you can find it more easily in future. And yeah, we hope you find this useful. And again, massive thank you to all the fund managers that enable me to make this free. And we are constantly updating our research, so be aware we do a big annual sweep up of the market every single year, but we make tweaks pretty much every day on this. We have a researcher who looks after this, Sue, is on this all the time, updating fund information. So do be aware, although the funds don't have massive swings in terms of how they change, there are bits and the new funds launching all the time. So be aware things can change in this market. But anyway, we stay up to date with it to help you to be up to date with it, and I hope you find it useful. Thank you. Bye.